Reading Nation churns out a knowledgeable and violent-free society. So on Good Morning Nigeria today, we examine the different dimensions affecting reading culture in Nigeria and what needs to be done to revive it. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul-Razak. Thank you once again for finding time to be with us this Friday.
And I'm Rhoda on Anonam. It's always a pleasure to have you join us on the program. We're reaching you, as always, live on the network service of Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. We're broadcasting live from our studios here in Abuja. In the course of the program, we'll bring to you our complimentary segments, and that includes the newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. But as always, the news comes first, and Musbah Danwahab has the news this morning. Musbah, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Rhoda and Claire. Welcome to the news. President Muhammad Buhari is urging state government to take more proactive measures in securing the lives and property of their people. This, he said, is necessary towards complementing his administration's genuine efforts at tackling acts of criminality for peace and prosperity. The president stated these at an audience with the governors of Kano, Katsina, and Zamfara State in Daura. The president also inaugurated more road projects executed by the Masari administration.
Before, you cannot pass through Jebia Kauranamuda Road. Now we have opened the road.
What is the secret behind the success?
As a human being, first of all, you have to be trustworthy, you have to be direct, and don't deceive. So we engage these people and we engage them fairly, and they accepted all the offers we offered to them. As I told everybody, we did not give them money or anything. All the people they released to us is unconditional, without paying any ransom. And we see they even release foreign national from Korea without paying a single kobo. And before I came, he was there about 7 months under captivity. So Zamfara is calm now and is peaceful. So we thank God for that. So I briefed him that now we have achieved a lot of success, and he promised me to do more about security in the state.
Kano is peaceful. Kano has been peaceful. I think it's one of the most peaceful states in the federation. So I also briefed him how we coordinated the security agencies in Kano, and also how we involved the community participation, especially the new emirates that we created. They are actively involved in keeping peace and stability in the state.
On security, the Nigerian army has denied the report in some quarters stating that its troop of 9 Brigade on patrol were involved in the killing of 3 people in a Sharia Olofin community of Koshafe local government area of Lagos State. A statement by the Assistant Director, Army Public Relations, 9 Brigade, Major Clement Abaide, says the Army patrol team only responded to a distress call and averted clash among Isheri boys, a cult group allegedly terrorizing the community. It says there was no fire exchange between the troop and the alleged cause throughout the period of the troops' intervention, and no one was killed as alleged in a misleading report. Rather, one soldier was injured by the cultists. He pointed out that peace has since been restored to the affected area. He requests the public to disregard the baseless story that is being circulated. Operation Wild Stroke says it has recovered not less than 2,000 rusted cows and arrested 10 suspects for armed banditry, kidnapping, and arms manufacturing. Commander of the operation, Major General Adeyemi Yekini, stated that the suspects were picked up in Benue and Nasarawa State.
Enough is enough. We will not tolerate banditry. We will not tolerate kidnapping. We will not tolerate other arms of extortion and criminalities in the Benue State in particular, but not just Benue State, but also Nasarawa and Taraba State.
A 60-bed ultra-modern reference hospital constructed by the Nigerian Army Air Force, to provide tertiary health care for its personnel and their family, as well as the host community, has been inaugurated in Daura, Katsina State. President Muhammad Buhari, who performed the ceremony, challenged the service to ensure that the facility serves as a center for medical research towards finding solutions to public health concerns in the country.
We are indeed most grateful to the Chief of Air Staff for finding Daura worthy of this gesture. I want to assure you of our support and commitment in ensuring that the hospital becomes fully functional and accessible to all Nigerians. I urge you to maintain the highest standard and quality of services the military is known for in attending to the patients and the host community.
May I assure His Excellency that the Nigerian Air Force will remain resolute in ensuring the return of normalcy to troubled areas across the country, working hand in hand with other sister services.
On infrastructure development, the federal government is working on necessary regulations to further encourage public-private partnership and power distribution in Nigeria. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo stated this at the official inauguration of a new 260 MVA Abeokuta power substation.
We must all realize that this project will not only improve the economic activities of their communities and environs, but go a long way in the successful implementation of our joint agenda of building a future together.
In democracies, the business of governance is the collective responsibility of all arms of government. This presupposes the resolve of the 9th Senate to support the federal government through the enactment of laws that will further strengthen the workings of government. President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawan, gave his assurance at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport on arrival from the Holy Pilgrimage in Saudi Arabia.
We prayed for our country to achieve optimum security, to have unity, to have stability, peace, and of course progress. It is our prayer and hope that this National Assembly will be a National Assembly that will continue to work for Nigerians for the benefit of those who voted for us. I want to take this opportunity to appeal to the executive side of government that we need to reverse the undesirable trend of the current budget cycle in Nigeria.
Senate President Ahmed Lawan. Now, another set of people living with disability have recorded a breakthrough in proving that there is ability in disability. This success is coming from the Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development.
This guy's stick, if you can see, the one that I'm using before is so old and looks somehow. But this one, it will be good to me for the mobility.
And government have proved to me that there is hope. There is ability in disability.
That they have tried a lot to make this one to elevate me, to build me more.
We'll continue to do all we can to ensure that everybody is carried along, everybody is provided needed support as much as we can, so that people are self-sufficient and people will contribute to Nigeria's economic, socio-economic growth.
That's a bit of the news on Good Morning Nigeria this morning. Join us for more subsequently in the course of the day. Meanwhile, Rhoda and Claire are on standby to take you through the topic for discussion, reading culture, after the break.
Son, being good at something requires strength. It requires pushing yourself. It requires putting in more. That's why the new improved Bornvita is packed with vitality and a great taste.
Protocol and event management are special skills which can only be acquired through training and experience. NTA TV College JOS is organizing a special 2-week course on protocol, event management, and public relations to upgrade the capacities of practitioners. The course will equip participants with modern skills, techniques, and international best practices in protocol, event management, and public relations. Also, a special 4-week intensive course on non-linear editing techniques will run concurrently. The course will expose participants to modern techniques and technologies of non-linear editing. Take advantage of this course to hone your professional skills for premium packaging of your programs and reports. The venue for both courses is the serene and secure environment of NTA Television College, near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos, Plateau State. Date 19th to 30th August 2019 for the course on protocol, event management, and public relations. 19th August to 13th September 2019 for basic non-linear editing techniques. Course fee 100,000 naira only per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more information, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College JOS, training you to be the best you want to be.
All right, welcome back. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria here, live here on Africa's largest TV network, the NTA. Now, let's talk a bit of business. And we've heard so much about the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which Nigeria, of course, has appended her signature. Many people believe that that framework would, or have the capacity to open up the continent and harness its numerous internal economic potentials. And economic experts are advocating for Nigeria to maximize that framework, that Nigeria should establish Nigeria Africa Export Bank. And that will form part of the program Business News with Kulu Mohammed.
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is opening up the continent and is pressing up to harness internal economic potentials of Africa. At an event, the executive officer of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, Olusegun Awolowo, told the president of DRC the gains inherent of close relations in business between Nigeria and the DRC.
Your biggest import partners are China, South Africa, Zambia, and Belgium. Here today, we need to change that narrative. Here today, we need to tell you that the cooperation is going to be now, we take those countries off, and it becomes Nigeria and other African countries. Mr. President, you were part of the strong African president team that signed the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And what that means is that we now need to trade more amongst ourselves.
Still on the African Free Trade Area Agreement, an expert hands in perspectives on the internal arrangement that would ensure Nigeria maximizes the gains of the Continental Free Trade Agreement.
First of all, we advocate that government should create Nigeria Africa Export Bank, NAIB. So what we mean by NAIB is that this NAIB will be able to encourage SME locally and as well as export Nigeria-made goods within the Africa continent, Africa country. So, and if government be able to set up Nigeria Africa Export Bank, you will now see this bank will be able to look at the local industries, which is the SME, that are producing purely made in Nigeria goods. Then the same bank will also take in second part by making sure there are SME that are mainly financing their export products within the Africa countries.
And finally, a quick check on the stock market to let you see Thursday's closing figures. That's Business News. My name is Kulu Mohammed.
Many thanks, Kulu Mohammed, for the business package. Up next on Good Morning Nigeria is the newspaper review segment.
right, time to begin our newspaper review, but that will come presently.
All right, our regular newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoyebi is here with us in the studio this morning. Bayo, as always, it's good to have you join us on the program.
Thank you, Rhoda. Good morning. Good morning, Claire. And good morning, Nigeria.
All right, we'll begin the review this morning with the Daily Sun. Let's begin with the Daily Sun. Wanted to start with the leadership, but the Daily Sun this morning. And that's a story that is trending on a lot of dailies this morning. And that, let me take the story just beside the nameplate first. It says, Boko Haram, shake up in army as 3 soldiers killed. Theater commander and others redeployed, new commanders appointed. That's a story that's on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Sun. But the lead story, that's the big story, and it's on most dailies this morning, is El Zakzaky back from India without treatment. El Zakzaky back from India without treatment. And the writer there says, my father on the verge of death, says daughter. That's the lead story for the Daily Sun, and it's on page 6. Let's go down now to more stories just at the foot of the paper below. It says just below the picture story, if you can, very quickly. It says federal government sets up committee to review revenue sharing formula, another to work out revenue-based expansion. And Masari hails Emeka for over Dora Library. That's on page 40. And kudos Knox Trail Prison name change. Bishop Kegama Ozekome, Catholic Diocese of Enugu, and others speak on the name change for the Nigerian prisons, which is now Nigerian correctional. It's not a correctional facility. And very quickly, it's also the same lead story that is on the front page of Friday's Leadership. And before we take that, it says federal government to open power sector to new investors. That's a story that has been trending for some days now. I think I'd like you to speak extensively to that. And 15-year-old stages own kidnap, demands 0.5 million ransom. That's on page 40. Minimum wage, workers seek President Muhammadu Buhari's intervention. That's on page 6. And the lead story, El Zakzaky rejects treatment, returns to Nigeria. And of course, because it's Friday, there's some entertainment on the front page of the Leadership this morning. Entertainers who jumped into the political arena. They're just, that's a picture story on the front page of the Leadership. And just the last story at the foot of the paper, it says money laundering, Atiku's son-in-law, lawyers gets 20 million naira bill. That's on page 20. All right, Claire, let's see what you have.
All right, I have different lead stories, that's headlines, but let's start with the lead story that Rhoda mentioned. That's the story about El Zakzaky. It does mention, enjoy some mention here from the blueprint, but it's just on the lower column, just below the picture story. You'll see it's captioned as confusion as El Zakzaky and wife return. On the front page of the blueprint, you'll see it just below the picture story, getting a mention there. All right, that's it. And the other mention it gets, it's on the, again, front page of the Daily Trust, just a little below the nameplate. If you can get that, Zakzaky wife returned to Nigeria after stalemate. That's how Daily Trust captions its own story about El Zakzaky and his travels to India and return. But the lead story on the front page of the blueprint, minimum wage, workers running out of patience, NLC. It comes with a rider, wants FG to come clean on implementation. Details of that you can read up on page 6. That's the front page of the blueprint. Other stories trending here, just a little below the nameplate. NAS ready to work for Nigerians. That's coming from the President of the Senate. You can see him also there. And another interesting one, and one that should be commended, of course, portraying Nigeria in a very positive light. Just the earpiece there, a little on the right column. 2 Kwara pilgrims return missing $1,400 to owners.
100.
1,400.
Yeah.
Yes, dollars to owners. 2 Kwara pilgrims return missing money to their owners. Okay, I'll take the other lead story from Daily Trust presently. Bayo, where would you put your money on any of the stories?
Well, on all. But let me start at least from the current one, the one that Rhoda asked me to talk about. Barely 96 hours after landing in India for medical treatment, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaki and his wife are reported to be on their way back to Nigeria. Another paper, in fact, put it that El-Zakzaki back from India without treatment. The hospital says that he discharged himself from the Medanta hospital. And when doctors make that kind of statement, it means the patient left the hospital against medical advice. The Punch reports that he is expected to arrive in Nigeria anytime from now. It may be recalled that he complained about the condition of his hospital environment as being worse than where he was held by the Department of State Services. The doctors are in disagreement with him for some of the requests he made. He wanted the doctors of his choice, it was declined. He wanted to be staying in a five-star hotel, it was refused. And he also wanted to be allowed free movement and visitors, that too was declined. And he was told categorically that his passport cannot be given to him, and therefore he refused to be treated and is currently on his way back. Meanwhile, there is the other interesting story about power.
Can we just talk a bit about this? Because just as Rhoda pointed out earlier on, he was granted bail on medical grounds.
He was not granted bail. He was granted medical leave.
Medical leave. So we need to understand the difference between medical leave and bail on medical grounds.
For us as laymen, he was granted medical leave. Lawyers will tell you that when you are granted permission to stay away from a trial, it is a bail, whether you call it medical leave or not. But the crux of the matter is that he was accompanied by DSS officials because he is not a free man. He's still standing trial.
So what happens on his
when
return?
he comes back?
He's still being accompanied back. And when he comes back, he should go back to the custody of DSS where he is, and probably there will be a resort to go to court. His counsels and the prosecuting counsel will have to sort it themselves out of the court. The court granted permission for medical treatment. Apparently, he has declined medical treatment because the conditions are not favorable to him. And so he's come back. So the medical leave has not been used. So we'll hear from the prosecution and the defense counsel, and probably the court, the next line of action.
Okay,
now, talking about the issue of power, the federal government is creating policies to open up the national electricity market to new investors in generation, transmission, as well as distribution. The Vice President, Professor Oshibaju, says that the current strategy and power, the way it's delivered, does not meet government promises for domestic and industrial use. Therefore, as at 6 a.m. yesterday, power generation stood at 3,586.5 megawatts. Punch, it may be recalled, had reported earlier on that federal government was proposing to take over the assets of the privatized electricity company, which will cost it about $2.4 billion, an equivalent of 736 billion naira. However, the Punch was citing, a document is cited that federal government, Ministry of Works, Power and Housing, had described the distribution company's activity as a failed investment. Meanwhile, the Vice President, while commissioning 260 megawatts distribution substation by the Niger Delta Power Holding Company in Abeokuta, says he lamented the inability of distribution companies to make available power on the grid for the nation's consumption. And what are the statistics about the power? Today, we have 13,427 megawatts installed capacity. However, the capacity that is available is only 8,342 megawatts. What does that mean? It means that the national grid has capacity for about 7,000 megawatts. So if 8,300 is available, they can only transmit 7,000 megawatts. Now, the distribution company that's supposed to take distribution around to domestic can only distribute 4,000. So you have generated 8,000, transmitted 7,000 and can distribute 4,000.
4,000. That's why even the Daily Trust, has a caption that says the Vice President is supporting recapitalization of the discos. But Bayo, we need to move quickly.
But Bayo, I'd like you to speak to a story that's a lead story for the Blueprint, and it's also on the leadership. It's a minimum wage workers seeks President Muhammadu Buhari's intervention. What's happening?
Well, NLC has also raised concern. Earlier on, a trade union congress raised concern. There is a negotiations currently going on with representatives of the federal government and Salary and Wages Commission, as well as representatives of labor. The percentages increase for those who earn more than 30,000 is the bone of contention. The federal government has offered a maximum of about an increase of about 10% within a range. Yeah. But labor is demanding a minimum of about 30% for those from level 7 to about 14. That is where there is a stalemate. Government is saying that there are two considerations for the minimum wage: to enhance the economic power of those who are earning less, and also government's ability to pay.
People people who are below 30,000.
Yes.
Are they being paid, or are they being paid?
There's directive that they should be paid. I'm not sure whether they have already been paid, because there's no dispute about that. Anybody who is earning less than 30,000 will get a minimum of 30,000 with effect from last April. That has been solved. What is left now is those above 30,000. And government is saying that for those who are on level 14 to 17, particularly those on level 17, it will occasion an increase of 100,000, which government cannot afford. So the ability to pay is one of the critical issues.
All right, Bayo, let's quickly. Apprehension in civil service over Oyeta's investigation. Alleged 3 billion naira fraud. Quickly take this along with the issue with the return of missing monies by the 2 Kwara pilgrims.
Well, the issue here is that the head of service of the Federation was invited in consonance with some money related to about 3 billion naira worth of contract. The papers are reporting that she was invited, detained, and she's now hospitalized. But there's a clarification from the Director of Communications of the Office of the Head of Service that yes, she was invited for questioning, but currently she has been on medical leave and she's supposed to resume to her office on Monday. A contractor has been cited with about 600 million naira in his or her account, and that is one of the subjects. Now about returning money. In fact, there have been 2 or 3 instances where pilgrims have cited or picked up foreign exchange belonging to their co-pilgrims, and they have returned it. It's a very good gesture. Currently, 2 persons are in Hajj at the behest of the National Hajj Commission. One is the Imam who saved over 200 Christians from Bimbadat in Plateau. The other is the Air Force officer who returned about 3,500 euros he found in an envelope in Kano. In fact, the 2 of them have been taken to Hajj.
All right, bye-bye. There's a story I just want to quickly take. It's on the Punch. It's at the foot of the paper on the Punch. It's on page. It's a story that's trended just all through last week and this week. And it was a woman that, there was a video that was circulating on social media of a woman who had this, little cousin living with him, and nobody knew what he did, but the video, we saw the woman lock that child inside a kennel. That's a dog cage.
A dog cage, yes.
And, I must say that the Nigerian police should be commended for this. As we speak, the woman has been arrested, and I think she'll be taken to court soon. A lot of people work towards that, but then the Nigerian police actually, because it was just a video, nobody knew who she was or where the video emanated from. But as we speak, the woman has been apprehended, and the boy, I think, is in custody of the Lagos State government.
Oh, that's good. She will have her day in court. But meanwhile, there's this story I'm sure that will interest you. A woman has established Naisha Kitchen in Borno, and is training housewives and spinsters about how to cook. Why? She has found that many wives are divorced because they don't know how to cook. And guess what? She is not even a catering officer. She knows how to cook. She learned from her mother.
Okay, Bayo. We just have enough time to look at the editorial. And the editorial is taken from the Nigerian Pilot. Bring soldiers who killed police officers on national duty in Taraba to book. Just 2 paragraphs I'd like to read out so you quickly do your review. According to a press statement released by the Defense Headquarters, that's in relation to this issue, the people its men killed were suspected kidnappers. Its men had earlier received a distress call from an unidentified caller. Now, the reaction of the force headquarters bears the grief and anger of the institution and the feelings of citizens. Now, here is the crux of this editorial, that this is one of the biggest tests of the Buhari presidency.
Yes, the editorial is commending the president for promptly directing investigation, because the version put out by the army is different from the version put out by the police. And the editorial is saying that there should be thorough investigation to ensure that these officers who were serving the nation were not killed in vain, and whoever is found culpable must be brought to book. Also, they are insisting that Alhaji Hamisu Bala, alias Who Do You Mean, which is corrupted to be Wadume, must be also found out wherever he is and brought to book.
All right, thank you very much, Bayo. That's the much we can take on our newspaper review segment this morning. We'll see you again on Monday morning.
Yes.
This is the last for the week. Do hope that you enjoy the weekend.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
So have a good rest.
I will.
And slave.
Yes. And enjoy working on the weekends, you too.
We've chosen our path.
Yes.
You know, and we're enjoying it. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a break now. When we come back, our topic for discussion this morning is improving reading culture in Nigeria. We'll be back in just a moment.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
All right, to kickstart our conversation this morning is a background report put together by Abdusalami Jibril.
Before I can stay 3 hours, then 3 hours fully and I'll read. But now, within 40 minutes, I'll say I have work to do tomorrow. Let me just rest.
The stress of going up and down to source for living is the order of the day. Like almost every time I'm busy.
Those views reflect the poor reading culture among Nigerians. Once upon a time, Nigeria paraded the best set of authors and publishers in Africa, churning out the likes of Chinua Achebe, Wole Soyinka, Buchi Emecheta, Flora Nwampa, and many others. Recently, however, the rich literacy history the country is famous for has gradually been eroded. Nigeria has been rated by the 2019 World Cultural Score Index as one of the countries in the world with the lowest reading culture. While these statistics are revealing, many have attributed the poor reading culture to widespread poverty, corruption, ineptitude, and shortage of libraries. Others say technology and the decline in the standard of education has seriously affected reading ability. Now, what has contributed to Nigeria's low reading culture, and how can it be revived? These and many more questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be providing answers to in the course of the program.
All right, thank you very much, Abdul Salami, there with the background report. And let's quickly introduce, we have our guests in some of our network outstations. But let's start with our guests here in the Abuja studio. And quickly, Professor Ashom Samari, who is the Dean, Faculty of Education, University of Abuja. Professor, thank you once again. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
And we have Rhoda. You have the next guest.
Also, we have from Port Harcourt. Okay, well, joining us live from Lagos, we have Coco Kalango, a project manager, UNESCO World Book Capital 2014, and founder Rainbow Book Club. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning. From Ibadan Network Center, we have joining us Professor Lanre Olatokungobo, the National Librarian and Chief Executive Officer, the National Library of Nigeria. Good morning and thank you for joining us on the program.
Morning.
Okay, I have the last guest here who is also joining us from Port Harcourt via Skype, and she is Ibim Seminatari. She is the Executive Director, Archdeacon Brown Education Center Group of Schools, and there she is, and of course she was former boss of the NDDC. We'd like to thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Claire. It's good to be on the program.
All right, let's quickly start this conversation, and I'd like to start with Prof here in Abuja. We heard there was a rating of reading culture among some, countries,
yes,
by World Culture Score Index,
yes,
and Nigeria was rated very low among
yes,
other countries. Can you give us an understanding of what this is?
Well, what this means is that amongst the reading habits of citizens, Nigerians are rated as having the least index of not having a habit of constant and regular reading. And this is easily understandable when you notice that when you travel, particularly with citizens of other countries, either on air or whatever means of transport, you mostly find people carrying either magazines, newspapers, novels, and what have you reading. But in our own case, it's either you find people engaging in conversation. Probably the best you can have is, if they are allowed to have access to their data, is to be reading and chatting their social media, which is the difference. So reading culture is a culture that is actually developed by people, and it is constantly as a habit, which we lack.
Okay, I was also wondering, but let me hear from the project manager of UNESCO World Book Capital and the founder of the Rainbow Book Club, Mrs. Coco Kalango. She's been in the forefront of promoting reading culture. What do you understand by the WCS rating of our reading habit as very low? All right, we do apologize for that holdback there. We'll get back to Mrs. Kalango in Lagos. Ibim, I'm sure you must have heard my question. Nigeria has been rated low among several countries in terms of our reading culture. Can you give us your perspective to that?
Well, and I think it's great the guest in the studio has touched on this. It's a culture that you begin from when children are very young. You have to get children to fall in love with their books. I know that in our generation growing up, we had things like doing book reports in schools. And we had things like parents asking what you were reading. But this time you don't have children reading. I started reading at age 3. By the time I was age 3, I was reading. And for my kids, I made a habit of getting my children to fall in love with books by giving them books as their gifts when they did well in school. Now, when we were growing up, we had libraries. We had libraries in the community. We had mobile libraries. So even if you didn't have a culture of reading at home, you got to borrow a book from the library when the mobile library came by your school, or in your own public school, you had access to books. But we don't have that going on anymore. So you see, a reading culture is something that is developed from when children are very young. It doesn't just chance upon you. You don't just pick it up as an adult. You've got to have it as ingrained in you, even from the primary school, from kindergarten. We ought to get children to borrow books from kindergarten. That's what we need to do. It's a culture that we must start when kids begin to talk. In fact, before they begin to talk.
Beam Seminitari. We will come back to you in the course of the discussion, but then let's go now to the National Librarian and the Chief Executive Officer of the National Library of Nigeria. Well, this report is out, no doubt, but to some people, with the society that we find ourselves now, everyone seems to be on the fast lane. Everybody wants things done quick. Some people don't understand when we're talking about reading culture this morning. If a society doesn't have a reading culture, what danger does that pose to that society? When people don't read, what is the danger in that? So that people can understand, because the average Nigerian would say, who reading app? What does it do for me? But then, when a society doesn't read, what danger does it pose to them?
Very much. It poses a lot of dangers. Let's even start from the current problem we have in Nigeria today, fake news. When people don't read, anything they tell them, they believe, and they start spreading it. That's one of the most indeed dangers you have when you have a low reading culture. And just to add to what my panelists have said about World Culture Score Index, the situation in Nigeria is very, very bad. When we say Nigeria is rated lowly, it's more or less trying to even say that we are doing something in Nigeria. But the important thing is that Nigeria is not even rated at all. In that table, only 2 countries in Africa appeared, South Africa and Egypt. Nigeria was not listed at all. And this is a very major problem. And as National Library of Nigeria, it's our major mandate to ensure that we improve the reading culture of Nigerians. And this present government has made a lot of efforts. Early this year, we are appropriated with about 100 million naira to promote reading culture in Nigeria. And we're going around all the parts of the country to ensure that reading is improved in Nigeria. The culture is improved. And we have even gone out of our ways to now just say, okay, don't let us go only to primary schools and secondary schools. We have even gone to expectant mothers, because research has proved in other countries that reading should start before the child is born. And what we have been trying to do, we've gone to many hospitals in Nigeria, in different parts of the country, try to sensitize the expectant mothers. Read to your unborn child before the child is born, because there are going to be a synergy. When that child is born, research has proved that it's likely to imbibe reading more than any other, more than a child, an expectant mother who did not read to his or her unborn child. So it's a major problem in Nigeria. We feel so much concerned that people do not take reading as a matter of major thing to develop the country. Many countries all over the world are tending towards knowledge economy. People do no longer want to depend on oil, on agriculture, and so on and so forth to generate income. When your people read, and Nigerians are intelligent people, they can just add reading to it, to make it a part of them. And one of the things we are doing, even early this year, we started going to motor parks. Because at motor parks, you have different categories of people. You have drivers, you have conductors, you have passengers who are waiting for buses to go to their various destinations. Rather than shouting and be talking, we said, no, take a book and read, so that it becomes part of you. So when you talk about reading culture, we want to make it a part, that when you are free, when you have any free time, rather than just gossiping and talking, arm yourself with a book. And this happens all over, especially in most developed countries. You go to developed countries, you are in a coach, you are in a train of about 2,000 people, hardly we hear any noise, because everybody is concentrated reading something, one thing or the other. So this is what we want for Nigeria. Let us imbibe reading right from childhood, so that people will know. And in any case, when you read, the whole world is at your feet. You know what goes on. You are more enlightened. So I would just I thank NTA for trying to assist us to promote reading culture because that is the only way to go. I don't know if any other way. Thank you.
Very much, Professor Ola Tokumbo. We'll come back to you in the course of this discussion, but let's come again to Professor Adamu Samari. We are said to be the giant of Africa.
Yes.
In the past, and even up till now, what most of the greatest authors in Africa are from Nigeria. We have the likes of Wole Soyinka, Femi Osofeson. You have the likes of Chinua Achebe. Now, young breeds are coming up. Chimamanda Adichie is there. How did we find ourselves in this point? How did we get here? We used to be a people who would read. I remember, like, in the course of this discussion, I remember Claire was saying, our early days, GSS1, SS1 to 3, we had a lot of books to read.
Well, the simple answer is that we derailed. The first generation of our citizens that went to school were brought up in the culture of reading. Reading was regarded very important. Reading was given the pride of place on the school curriculum, and therefore provision of books were made available and all sorts of things. There was also the curriculum which entails that students must make reports of the books they read, but this is no more. When you look at the new generation Nigerians that are making waves in reading and writing, Chimamanda, as you have just rightly said, you will discover that these are people that are not based in Nigeria. So they have acquired that culture elsewhere. Why is it not possible for us to acquire it here? It's the neglect of the reading culture and the importance of reading. I wouldn't want to say government alone, but even by parents. But of course, government has to take the lion's share of the blame, because what is there on ground to help? We need a stimulating environment. We need the resources. We need the books. I got from the professor who is a librarian and says we've been given 100 million. What would 100 million do to a whole country like Nigeria for purchase of books? What is the cost of one book today? That is a pittance, to be honest. So this has to be addressed.
We will explore more of the causes and what has brought us to this stage in a short while, Prof. Coco Kalango is ready for us in Lagos. And Coco, as I said earlier on, you've been at the forefront driving efforts to promote and revive our reading culture. But what's your perspective to the World Culture Score Index rating of our reading habits? Is it a true reflection of, our reading culture?
Thank you. The rating attributed to Nigeria is really something that should disturb all of us. But I must say that this problem of a decline in reading is not peculiar to us. I think it's a general thing all over the world because of social media, our modern communication equipment that is so distracting, particularly to young people. But that being said, we still have to do something to address this problem. And I think I can think of three things that have caused this. Perhaps one is prioritization. When we prioritize education, and in particular reading, as a people, as a society, then we would all pay attention and play our part from our different spheres. Then there's also sincerity of purpose. We have heard over the years governments, corporates, different individuals talking about promoting reading, but sometimes it doesn't look very sincere. We don't promote reading by going around and making speeches about reading. We promote reading by providing spaces and programs that are relevant, that are interesting, that are topical. So libraries are very important, but so are other innovative ways like book clubs. The Rainbow Book Club, for instance, has been organizing and running book clubs in schools for 15 years. And in the course of Port Harcourt's tenure as World Book Capital, we ran 200 book clubs there. Book clubs are very important because they provide social gathering for people around books. And third, it's a team effort. No one individual or one organization can achieve this promotion of reading. We all need to work together. It's almost like a war against illiteracy, against ignorance. And we have to fight it from different fronts. We have to fight it from the home, from the school, from government, from corporate. We all bring something to the table. So I'd like to see a bit more synergy between all these groups. As Ibim said from Port Harcourt, we should read to our children. I used to read to my children since, they were babies. That's a way that people inculcate a reading culture. And it's very good when it started from a tender age. And by the time they're adults, it's just too late. You can't take it away from them. And then libraries are a priority as well. So these efforts have to be, we have to look at a holistic picture and look at a long-term plan. A lot of corporates have been doing things, but I wish we would speak between ourselves to see how we can join hands to really promote reading. Book festivals are also very important. It's sad to see that some book festivals that were started are not continuing. What these festivals do is give a platform for the players in the book industry to converge, to converse on how we can encourage reading. And it really attracts young people. The youth are so important in this movement. So this is where I would stop for now.
Coco, thank you. You've already fast-forwarded us to solutions. We needed to understand, how bad our reading culture is. But I'll keep you on hold for now and return to Ibim in Port Harcourt. Ibim is Executive Director, Archdeacon Brown Educational Center Group of Schools. So you would have probably a personal experience to us. How bad is our reading culture, especially among students?
Well, like I said, Claire, when I started, it goes without saying that we have a bad situation. What we've tried to do in our group of schools is to do what we call drop everything and read campaign for the kids. Because you find that children come into school and yes,
Oh dear, we're having network issues this morning. Yeah. Ibim, we'll return to you in a short while. Prof, how bad, you are, Dean Faculty of Education, University of Abuja, among students, how bad is reading culture? What prompts, students to read, really?
Well, the situation is really bad. Don't be surprised you get to our universities. A student will finish a whole semester without going to the library, even though they will claim they have the virtual library, they use their handsets and what have you. But what do you have them read? These are students who will only read when they have an assignment. And the assignment is targeted at only one topic. And they go just to look for that information, which is purely the kind of reading that we call it the most shallow type, skimming. But when you have a reading culture, you read for a whole lot of different purposes. To understand people's view, to make your own perspective, to critically examine whether that person is biased or that person is actually saying the fact. But when you now depend on reading just to pass an examination, then that is not the reading culture we are talking about.
That was the point I wanted us to underscore in the course of this discussion as we're talking about reading culture, that it is not just about reading to pass an exam or reading for a purpose. Yes. Reading opens your horizon. Yeah.
Reading as a habit. And that is what we are talking. Our students, both tertiary and secondary schools, rely on just getting information to pass examination. The culture of reading for reading's sake is not there. And that is why you find students relying purely on teachers' notes, lecturers' notes, and that cannot take them. That cannot give us the kind of reading habit that we want. We want you to read because you are interested to know. Know beyond your own area of specialization. Know what the society is talking about. And this is what leads to discovery. Because it is when you are reading at random that you begin to find new facts. But when you are reading because you need something, you are not looking for anything new. It's something you already have.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Adamume Samari. Let's go back to Ibadan, where we have Professor Ola Tokumbo. Prof, when we talk about reading culture, a lot of times, some people say, oh, Nigerians are reading, you know. Okay, we read some books. What books are, you are the national librarian, what books from your experience now as we speak, what books are youth reading? And what books are they supposed to read? Are we reading the right books?
Very much. I have to make some two corrections before I answer your question. My name is Professor Lenry Olatukunbo Aino. Aino is the surname. And to my colleague in the studio, what I said was that government appropriated 100 million for us to promote reading culture, not to buy books, to promote reading culture. And now coming back to your question, we want children or all citizens of Nigeria to have broad knowledge of what goes on in the world. We are not trying to say, oh, just read the books that you are specializing on. Not say, oh, I'm an engineer, I want to really read books on engineering. No. We want people to have broad knowledge, know what goes on all over the world. For example, when I read, when I see any news, I know it is fake immediately. I can't wait to take fake news because I read all kinds of books. So I try to have knowledge in every part of knowledge. I mean, to try and see what is happening, both within Nigeria and outside Nigeria. And like I mentioned, this is what is promoting fake news. Because people are not making reading as an habit. And this particular thing affects Nigerians more than any other group of Africans. Yeah, people will agree with me that when you fly in a plane in Africa here, where Nigerians are, to be shouting all over, let it be 5-6 hours flight. Once Nigerians are in majority, they'll be shouting, talking on top of their voices. But when you travel in other airlines that have Africans rather than Nigerians, everybody just be going, reading something, and then, you know, they'll be discussing on the lowly, we hardly can say the person sitting next to them hear what they are saying. But ours is an honorary society where we make too much loud noise. And this is because we don't make use of our time. You don't have to read only books that are of interest to promoting your education or promoting your skill, but just have general knowledge. So what we try to do is to provide all kinds of books to all kinds of Nigeria. In our own national library, we order all kinds of books. So I want people to be exposed, primary, secondary, tertiary, fiction, non-fiction. So these are the issues. People should have broad knowledge. Just don't say because I'm a doctor, I only want to know something only in medicine. Know all kinds of things. And that is why we are even happy now that history has been brought back. When Nigerians tell you what happened 10, 30, 40 years ago, for those of us who witnessed what happened, we are amazed. Then we ask you, where did you read this? They say, oh, that was just told. And that's our major problem. And that's why this country, every stakeholder must be involved in promoting reading. We have to do it. That's the difference between us and most other parts of the world. And libraries constitute a major role. Libraries have to provide current and up-to-date books, which we are trying to promote all over the country. But most especially, those that can promote reading culture in Nigeria are parents and teachers. Parents and teachers are very, very important in promoting reading culture. In most other climes, when a child is celebrating a birthday, the parents will buy, how many people are in your class? There are 40. They will buy 40 different storybooks. Take to your class, give to everybody in the class. That's how to celebrate birthday. But here in Nigeria, the eldest will buy cake, we buy Coke, and take to class. So it is, if parents are really involved, if teachers are involved, our reading will improve. And of course, libraries, we have to provide books, because library is a social service. We know some people cannot afford to buy these books. I mean, when somebody is competing to buy food and books, food will take priority. This is why libraries exist, so that you can go there without having to pay anything and read all kinds of books. But the most important thing is that we must promote reading culture. And it is the function of every Nigerian. We cannot go on like this. You want to go be a knowledge economy. And the government has relevant policies to guide all these things. For example, in the Nigerian National Policy of Education says that every school in Nigeria must have a library manned by a qualified librarian. But how many schools have what you can call standard libraries in Nigeria? So this is why the problem starts from. And government alone cannot do all these things. Communities must be involved to ensure that we promote reading culture.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Sorry, Rhoda, I just like to, Prof. I like to stay with Prof. just before you go to Lagos.
Okay.
Sorry, Prof. Rhoda asked you a question earlier on which you tried to answer, but I like you to also, go a bit deeper. We would like to know how National Library itself is promoting or encouraging reading culture in the sense of the type of books that you stock and what people who come into the libraries look out for.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear it here.
I said, how is the National Library itself encouraging, students to read or promoting reading culture in the sense that the kind of books that you stock, are there books that also appeal, to people who use the libraries?
Thank you very much. The way we promote reading culture is to go to all states of Nigeria, arrange competitions for primary schools and secondary schools, where we give them prizes, and we encourage them to read all kinds of books. We invite people from Reading Association of Nigeria to help us moderate the questions that are going to ask them. So we do that. Then we donate books, different types of books. We tour all the 36 states of Nigeria, including an FCT, to ensure that people appreciate reading. So we are doing that at the level of primary and secondary school level. But we are also saying that we need to improve reading culture, not only for primary school children or secondary school children, but for all citizens in Nigeria. And one of the things that, like I mentioned earlier, we also involve expectant mothers to read to their children. And for example, we had a recent one in Katsina, where we went there to the hospital, and the mothers were so enthusiastic. And the governor's wife, Her Excellency Ms. Baseri, even gave us crates of eggs, several crates of eggs to give to the expectant mothers. So, and they were all asking us good and relevant questions. So what I'm just trying to bring out from this is that let all stakeholders, let us be involved, and most especially parents and teachers. For us in the libraries, we provide variety of books, both local and international, just to ensure that people buy reading. Because research has shown that go to anywhere, even in Nigeria here, schools that have standard libraries, their children, the students perform better than those without standard libraries, because the teacher alone is not supposed to teach the child in the class. The child should go to the library and look at other sources, so that by the time the child is faced with any problem, he has comprehensive answers to such problems. So the only thing we need to do is to ensure that all of us become involved in promoting reading. It is a national problem, and all of us must tackle this problem.
Thank you very much, Professor Olatokunbo. One issue that you've raised, I think a lot of parents that are watching, should take note of is the fact that, these days really clear when kids, do their birthdays in some schools, a lot of schools allow them now. The cost of the toys and the snack in the party pack really can actually buy a good book for the school library or for the children that are in that class. And I think a lot of parents should actually look into this. You see the party packs. Sometimes when my son comes back with one, I'm like, one child's birthday and you have all of these gifts. That could actually buy a book. And so parents should look inwards in that direction. Let's go to Lagos, where we have Coco Kalango. Coco, I was asking Professor Olatokunbo, What kind of books are people reading now? Especially we're looking at youth, young adults. And what books are we supposed to read? I remember yesterday talking with my producer and she was like, what kind of books we're reading? I'm like, okay, apart from books on journalism, I think I'm reading more of Think Smart and Grow Rich, or, something motivational books, or something that has to do with, how I can make my millions. Is that what we're supposed to be reading right now? What books are people actually reading? What books are they supposed to read?
Thank you. There's nothing wrong with reading books on how to, grow rich. But to answer your question, indeed, it's not just about reading, but it's reading for personal and national development. So it is, what are we reading? Some people would say a lot of the people on their smartphones and social media are reading, but you want to ask, what are they reading? Is it gossip? Is it the sentences that are abbreviated with bad spelling? So what we are reading is very important. I would say books from which we can learn. When I work with children, we always try to look for the lesson, what we can take out of the story. But I must say that something that's very important to promoting reading, we can't just gather people in a hall and be telling them you need to read, In a lot of those programs, the children look bored. The youth are not interested. So we must make reading attractive. And that's why one of the things we did, or the Rainbow Book Club does, is to get role models in different spheres of life to read to children. So we have had, in Port Harcourt, we've had people like the musician Burna Boy, we've had Julius Agu, we've had people from Nollywood read to children. Last year on World Book Day, we had Vice President Oshibanjo read to children in Abuja. And this is very interesting because here you have leaders. We've had captains of industry. So when you have people that the youth or children look up to, taking the time to read to them and through those books share their personal stories. I tell you, it's very powerful. I remember, I think it was in 2012 in Port Harcourt, we had the Reverend Jesse Jackson, and he read from Nkrumah's biography, a child version, to children, and he interacted with them. And here are these children asking all sorts of questions. So that ignites their interest, and it flames the fire up. So we need those in popular culture to help us drive reading. I would also like to say that Port Harcourt, being the World Book Capital in 2014, was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Nigeria to have just run with the reading culture. What the World Book Capital program does is identify a city for its efforts in promoting reading, and that's what we got in Port Harcourt. But thereafter, it should not have died. In fact, what should have happened is that the programs that we ran in the city should have been replicated around the country, and that's why I talked about sincerity of purpose. So government, the corporates, the stars of social culture, the musicians, the artists, the comedians, the people that our young people listen to, really have to join hands with parents, the formal education system, to promote this reading. It is so important. So I'd leave it here for now.
No, Coco, don't go away. We still like you to talk to us because you've touched on the issue of strategy, reading strategy, and you mentioned the fact that you've used role models, to read to children. I also remember in Port Harcourt, I think I covered that event where you also have the former governor, that's Honorable Rotimi Chibuike-Amaechi, reading to children, and we were watching through the window and we saw the excitement. So, can you tell us what impact really, does reading to children do, and how does it help to promote their reading habit?
Thank you. As I said, talking about reading to children, and to buttress what Ibim had said as well, one of the most effective places is from home. As a mother, I read to my children over the years. I gather people's children and read to them and interact with them around books. So it is so important. What the children see you demonstrate, your lifestyle, is probably more powerful than even someone making a speech about reading. So indeed, the then governor of Rivers State used to read to children on behalf of the Rainbow Book Club, and so did Governor Fashola of Lagos State, so did Dora Akunyili when she was minister, and the former minister of Petroleum, Dizani, Obi Ezekwesili. So we've had, you know, people from industry as well. So what it does is it shows that that individual, that organization that they represent takes reading very seriously. And then the books we choose are very carefully chosen. We choose books that would excite the children, as you have, for instance, said how you witness the excitement on the face of the children. And this is what we see everywhere we go. When we take these people to read to children, they actually come out so excited, and they're asking, you know, when next? We read with Odei Ajumogobia. He was also minister then to children in Port Harcourt. So it is something that shouldn't be the reserve of one organization. It should be, everyone should be doing it everywhere. We need more book festivals. The book festivals are a fun way to introduce books, because there, part of what we did at the Port Harcourt Book Festival is to put books on stage. And in the course of the World Book Capital, every month we will take one book and get the city reading the book, and then get a drama troupe to replicate the book on stage, and that makes it more interesting to the children. We should talk to the Film Association to get our great books in film. So all these sectors need to work together. When they talk about the creative industry, which is topical all over the world, many people just stop at, you know, music, film. Books are part of the creative industry. We don't want anyone to forget us. We're here, we're very important, and we're happy to work with the other streams of creativity to even promote the reading culture. So I'll stop here.
All right, thank you very much, Coco. Very important points that you have raised. I remember the very first time I saw The Lion and the Jewel. Before reading it, I saw it as a play. And that made me, you know, go look for the book to say, oh, I think I really need to read this book. Now, let's go back to Ibim in Port Harcourt. Ibim, sorry we lost connection with you earlier. But then I'd like you to speak to some of the issues that she's raised and some of the questions that Claire actually asked, you know, in terms of what, you know, reading for children, what it does for them. And also to take along with the fact that what role does a library play in the reading culture of children, having a library either at home, either in school, or just somewhere in your community? How important is that?
Okay, so what reading for children does is that beyond.
Wow. The network, it seems to be
we're having a challenge with her. She's joining us via Skype, so the network seemed to actually be a problem. Let's bring in Prof, who's here with us. Prof, would like to react to some of the questions that I just asked. You know, reading to children, how important is it? What role does it play? And then, you know, having a library either at home, because I know that some of our parents, for some of us who had parents who were educated, you know, there's always a small shelf where you have, you know, different kinds of books. How important is it, whether at home, whether in school, whether in the community?
Yeah, like we said, reading culture is a habit formation, and habit formation is a deliberate act that you do. And so the importance of the home can never be overemphasized. This is because as young as they would be, that is the time to imprint on them that they need to read, and read it is important. And so the parents at home, provision of the relevant books, attracting them, motivating them to want to read becomes very important. For example, you have books. It's not just to place the books on the shelf or on your table, but get them to read the book. And one way of getting them is not just to tell them, read the books. Can you tell me what this book is all about? You've been holding it. Prompt them to tell you. They will want to read in order to summarize. Create time with the children to discuss the book, discuss their own view, whether they agree with what the author is saying or not. Create time, whether they enjoy reading the book and why. This is how to open the mind and develop the mind. And this is the only way we get books to be useful and relevant to the society, because we say reading is a tool for self-development, for national development. You get the views of others, you critically examine the view of others. And of course, This is how you get the competence in reading. It's not just about literal reading, but also the inference you are able to derive and the critique you are able to make of a book. Of course, some of the social media fake news we have that people take and regurgitate without questioning is because they have not developed the reading competence. Because there are certain information when you read, you ask yourself, can this be true? In the context of this, is it real? Is it possible? By the time you ask such critical questions, you are able to dispel any news that you feel it is
Are there
not true.
stages in this developmental process, in the process of developing competence in reading?
Yes.
Are there stages that you must pass through?
Well, some of these stages can overlap. For example, the literal is the first stage. That's where you get to know the meaning of what the person is saying in black and white. But before you get to the inference, you must have understood the stated meaning. And so that is the second stage. And then to be able to say, well, this is the inference, this is what this man is inferring, or this is what he is saying undertone, you would be able to have developed the capacity. Is it true? What he is trying to infer, can it be real? That is a third stage. So it is graded.
All right, thank you very much, Professor May Samari. Let's take the tweets that we have. Our viewers already sending in their tweets via our Twitter handle at NTAGMN. You can also be a part of it, sending your tweets. Our Twitter handle is on the screen there at NTAGMN. Well, the first one is from Festus Akimboyo. It says, sad that many Nigerians are reading, but are not reading because of home videos that are taking over the place of reading. High cost of books, that's limiting access to books, and insufficient trained staff needed to prosecute reading culture in Nigeria. Time to establish book clubs across Nigeria.
Yeah. And law of reading culture has tremendously dropped with the emergence of the internet, and this provides a great challenge on government as a considerable measure of our values have become extinct. Now, government at all levels should task itself by providing state-of-the-art libraries in different parts of the country and equip them with affordable books while making reading part of all examinations in Nigeria. I'd like to emphasize that, Law. It says, make reading part of all examinations in Nigeria. I don't know if Prof would subscribe to that. You have my mic.
All right, Mike Anyoko says, reading culture emancipates human development in all facets of endeavors. It gives me joy seeing even Okada riders struggling to read newspapers at free reader stand of vendors. Reading helps people to be sophisticated with the environment. We must imbibe the spirit into our children. And this one says, to be realistic, how many befitting libraries do we have within the 36 states of the Federation before we talk about that of the 774 local government areas? First things first, if we must revive reading culture, federal, states, local government, our schools must all have a good library.
Yes, that's actually from Sani Michael or Marco G. Now, Dele, your tweet reads, socioeconomic environs not reading friendly, I beg your pardon. Now, the daily struggle for economic survival provides little or no time for people to cultivate a good reading habit. Now, equally, high cost of books, particularly imported ones, also contribute to low readership promotion in the country.
The internet has dissuaded the habit of reading culture in Nigeria, says Titus Monday. And it says, come to think of it, how many viable national and state libraries are functional? Newspapers are read online today, and even when people try to buy them, the old ones, they are far out of reach or rather expensive.
Now, this is Usman Banikantu. Now, both the old and young are married to and tied to their phones, which we very much consider as part of our lives. Definitely reviving reading culture is like discarding the use of GSM phones.
And the Sussin's tweet, it says there are vast, unlimited amount of information available on the internet now that you can read with your smartphone. We may not be reading hardcover books. That doesn't mean we no longer read. Knowledge has now been digitized and not limited to hardcover books.
And Akeju or Lagbajo traits put more value on education and threats for acquisition of knowledge. Better is the reading culture. There is no two ways to it. We need to rejig reading culture at the level of primary education and make it an embodiment of excitement. Now, reading for a specific purpose is not a culture. And I do agree with you, Akeju, because for me, and I must confess, what prompts me to read is, the text, the print, and then even the content of what I'm reading. If I pick up a book and, I don't like the text or the print, it doesn't encourage me to read. So I don't know, maybe I'll come back to you, Prof. Let's go again to Coco. Are there prompts, for one to read? Or what are the prompts I should ask, for reading?
I'm not sure I got that question, but just taking from the discussion, some very important points have been raised. They've reiterated the importance of book clubs, of libraries, but as someone also talked about digitalization, which is so important indeed. We need to recognize that more and more people are reading digital information, getting their information digitally, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's why the modern libraries need to have the physical book, but the digital, because even if the digital world seems to be taking over, I must tell you that more than 50% of people and even schools still use physical books. But I'd like to add something to helping promote this reading. And it's something we've talked about, the Rainbow Book Club I have talked about. We should have a reading time in the weekly timetable of schools, particularly at primary level, if possible at secondary school level as well. I believe it was Government College Umuahia in the 30s, 40s, had compulsory reading time every week. And that's the school that produced writers like Chinua Achebe, Gabriel Okara, Elechi Amadi. You'll see that a lot of those that came from there that wrote did not necessarily study English or literature. So that's a testimony to how powerful reading is. Elechi Amadi, for instance, I believe studied mathematics and he went into the army. So he wasn't like the Soyinkas or Achebe, that were core literature people. Cyprian Ekwensi was a pharmacist. So in those days, there would be library time. And I think that's very important. It helps the children focus. It helps to keep the children quiet. So library time, I think, is something that we should really look into. It's something that is so very important. So I'll stop there now.
All right, Coco, well, we're just saying here, Claire, that I know that a lot of boarding schools, they have a reading time. I don't know if day schools do.
Prep.
But prep then. Yeah, you're right. You got it right. It's prep. But then, Coco, I'd like to raise an issue with you that someone raised in the course of the tweets that was actually sent in. And it's also part of a question that we have raised here. The costs of books. Could that also be a reason why people are not buying to read? Young adults, is the cost of books also a part of the issue?
The challenge with reading in Nigeria is not isolated from the general socioeconomic realities in which we live. So for many people, in interacting with people, you'd hear that they say to themselves, I've not met my primary needs of, maybe shelter and core education. Why should I bother about reading? So that's a real issue that we can't run away from. And I think one of the things we can do is make them realize the correlation between reading and prosperity and making it in life. It's important because when you read, you're empowered with knowledge. As someone rightfully said, the world is trading in a knowledge economy, so we can't afford to be left behind. So you empower yourself mentally, you get information, the world is open to you when you can read. So people need to realize that reading can actually prosper you and help you meet all your other needs. Indeed, books are costly, I would say, and that's mainly more expensive are books that are imported. So we need to encourage the local book industry. And there are so many things. That's why I talked of the social economic situation in which we find ourselves. Take books for children, for instance. Many times, if you want children to read books, those books have to be attractive. One of the ladies in the studio talked about, the sort of books that you pick up that she gets attracted. I think it was Claire. How does the book look? How's the title? What's the size of the words? What's the size of the book? So we must make books attractive. We don't just churn out books and they're sitting on shelves and no one reads them. And then we'll be talking about the power problem and all that, because this all adds to the cost of books being high. For a lot of people who publish in Nigeria, they send the material to India to be printed and then imported to Nigeria. And this is so sad. So perhaps if we solved our power problems, things would change. But honestly, as I said before, it has to be a holistic effort, and we have to have all the team players playing together. Government, corporates, celebrities, stars, moms, teachers, schools, everyone has to work together if we're serious, if we want to be intentional about addressing the reading decline in Nigeria.
Thank you, Coco. We'll get back to you soon. Ibadan, let's bring in Professor Aino. Professor Aino, is there a sense, we've talked about, of course, all the positives about the advancement in technology, the use of ICT and the internet and all that. Is there a sense in which that has also contributed negatively to our reading culture?
As far as I'm concerned, I believe strongly that internet and all these accessories, they have even come to complement reading. I find it easier to read most of the newspapers from the social media on my internet, lie on my bed and read. Of course, that doesn't mean I don't even read the physical ones. But what I'm trying to say is that it does not affect it in any way. It depends on the way we see it. For example, when we go to schools in the States to give them prizes, we give them tablets, consists of all kinds of information, both knowledge, what they do in school, and what we tell them to know is contained in the tablet. So rather, I don't think it's a barrier. The problem is that reading culture is not what we are promoting. And that's why we have all these type of problems and so on and so forth. You can read anywhere, whether physically or digitally, as long as you read. Many researchers will tell you that they even find it easier to read things that are digital because you can correct very easily. So my problem is that habit is not there. That habit, we need to promote the habit. Once the habit is there, whether it's in the physical book or it's available digitally, we want to go and read. What we want is just to gain knowledge. That's the important thing. So I think where the problem lies is promoting the habit. And like some of our panelists have mentioned, in the past, when we were in schools in the 60s and 70s and 80s, reading culture was not a problem. As a matter of fact, I remember as a teenager at that time, the more books you read, the more you are likely to have a girlfriend. It was that easy. Because you go to the art game, you start talking about the books that you have read, and everybody will be laughing at, but now it's just completely out of the picture. People they just feel that book is just it's an irritant, and it should not be. It should not be an irritant. And when one of my colleagues also mentioned that maybe the prices of books, yes, I agree. I agree completely that books can be very expensive. By the time you spend 1 or 2 million to buy books, you find that maybe they are just only about 30 pieces. So I agree that it can be very expensive. But this is where libraries come in. Libraries are for everybody. You know, whether you are poor, you are rich, you go to the library. And then I was discussing with one of our ministers recently, and he told me that when he was in school, he read almost all the books in the library. Because you go to the library, pick one book, read, take it back, take another, and so on and so forth. So it depends on the habit. So what we should do as Nigerians is that let us promote that habit. Once we have done that, our problem will be solved.
Stay with you, Prof. I was going to ask you, you just said something now that the library, from what you just said, is the library is like a leveler. Whether you have money to buy the books or not, you can come into the library to read. What is the state of libraries across the country as we speak? At state levels, how are you collaborating with state governments, to equip libraries, corporate organizations? Because federal government cannot do it alone when it comes to books and reading. I know some telecoms, all companies that are promoting the culture of reading. How are you collaborating with these people to equip most of the libraries, especially in states or local governments?
Very much. We as the federal agency responsible for library, we try to promote libraries in all the states. And as a matter of fact, that we hold a regular conference every year that involves national librarian and state library boards all over. There's no doubt some states are really in bad shape, very, very bad shape. And this depends on some of the state governors, where they don't believe that libraries should exist. There is one state in the southeast. The last time they bought books was about 15 years ago. And we tried every effort to see the governor, but it was rebuffed. This particular library was, library anywhere in the world must be accessible to all readers. So this library was in a vibrant place, in a place where everybody could access. But this governor demolished the library, put it in an outskirt of the state capital, and used it to build car park for a church. So when you have that type of problem, what do? We made all efforts. I used to be the national president of the Nigerian Library Association, and as national librarians, I was very much interested. To even see the governor to change his mind was impossible. So we need the governors to also complement what federal government is doing. Some states are fantastic. For example, I've been to all the states many times. You go to Bayelsa State Library, you go to Kaduna State, you go to Bauchi State, and maybe Lagos. But some of the states are really in bad shape. And we are praying that now that we have a new set of governors, we want to see we can go through our own minister, we have Minister of Education, to ensure that the states believe in provision of libraries to their citizens. So there is really in Nigeria as today, out of 36 states, maybe you can only point out about 10 states. The remaining states are just really in a bad shape. They don't reckon with the library at all. They don't provide money to buy books and all kinds of things. But one state library that has done very well in the last 2 or 3 years is Delta State Library Board. We have a beautiful library board in Delta State that can be compared to anywhere in the world. That is one of the very few states where you think the governor is so much interested. So for the states, it depends on the governors. And then I want to use this opportunity to appeal to our people in all the states to promote libraries. If you don't promote libraries, we are just doing danger to ourselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. Well, for Delta State, I'll say it's not new. Growing up in Delta, I'd always, gone to the library then in Sapley, I think along Court Road. You just register with your tag and, you take a book, you go and you come back. So it's good to know that they're improving on it.
All right, Rhoda. Prof, again, like she said, nowadays in the university, you cannot, write an assignment without getting to the library. Yes. So get your books. You go to the library, you scan through the shelves, and then you pick up, a book of interest, and then you go through it. But I will ask you my next question after this break. I'm told to call for a break now. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll continue with our program.
Jana! wash my hand from oil bunkering.
General, what you gonna yarn? What did the yarn say? I don't understand though.
Because they spoil our water and our environment. And they cause our people serious harm. Militants is there. You know good. Me, I not do again, Sam. Because why? Change begins with me.
General
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, this is Good Morning Nigeria. Just before we called for the break, I was directing my question to Professor May Samari here. I'd like for you to take on the question Rhoda asked about the state of the libraries. And just, during the course of our conversation, I asked Professor Aino what kind of books we have in our libraries. Are they specifically targeted to a particular, readership, particular age group? And secondly, I don't know how you're going to wrap all this. I also asked whether ICT, internet, have affected reading culture negatively. And I asked that because you just go to the net and then you use the search engines. You get the information you want, and that's all. You close the chapter. You don't get to read, through the books.
Yeah. Well, very importantly, I think I need to address the issue of what prompts people to want to read and to read consistently. It's the relevance of the book and the ability of the author to match the reading capacity of the reader. So for book selection, particularly the librarians who go to purchase books, they should be able to have a target. What book are we buying and for which group of readers? If you don't have that, you bring a book and it will not interest the reader and it will be there on the shelf for years. So if you are buying for children, you have to look at the diction, you have to look at the sentence structure, you have to look at the volume of the book. Is it that will match the reader? Because that is one of the things that will sustain their reading ability.
Precisely.
And then also, if you are buying for subject areas, whom are you targeting? Are they specialists in that area? Or they are general people who want to have general knowledge? Because all of this will determine what will be the criteria for selecting a particular book to purchase. Not going because I have 10 million, then whatever book 10 million can buy, I bring. You will end up buying books that will not be read by anybody. So that is very important, and I think it should be addressed by readers who purchase books and who stock libraries to know that they have to have a target. Who are you buying the books for, and for what purpose? Then secondly, the issue of the internet as we have. You are very right. The internet has made reading readers lazy because it is like skimming and scanning. You ask for an information and it takes you to just that paragraph or even a line. And you get what you want and you drop. But holistic reading means reading a gamut of what you need and what you don't need to be able to compare and contrast whether what you are reading from that is true or somebody has said something contrary to that.
So how do we maximize the benefit of both?
Well, my advice is that because the digital library also has a complete text, readers should avoid just going for scanned information. Read a whole text to be able to digest and be able to pick what you think is relevant and discard what you think is not relevant. It's not just saying it is relevant, but ability to also say this is not relevant is also a knowledge. So you need to read both sides, not just picking and then dropping the information you want, as people would have the answer of 2 + 2 is 2. How did you get to 2? You don't know. That does not account for good readership. And the libraries in the universities and the general society, the public libraries, is indeed, we cannot begin to pretend about it, is really bad. As a young person, I remember in ABU in those days, you had a complete section, public library, that was open to everybody from Monday to Sunday. Everybody, the general public was allowed to come and read. Students can also go there during their leisure to read. And then you have the real core library, which was for the academics, which was meant for the academic, the students, the lecturers, for researchers and all other things. But how many of the universities today maintain even the real core academic library talk less of the public library to service the community. That is not there. So, indeed, we may be shying away from the reality. Yes, we know TED Fund has come in, particularly in the universities, to make provisions for books, book development, book publication, and what have you. I know last week the ES of TED Fund also inaugurated a committee to work on that, and they are really working with a promise of good amount of money being devoted to that. But the issue is, what about the states? This is only for tertiary institutions. But what about the states? What about the general public? And I like what the librarian, former librarian president of Librarian Society of Nigeria said. Some state governors do not see the need. And if they see the need, there will be a budget for it from the states. And they will also appeal to stakeholders. What do you have your contractors to donate to the people? What is their corporate social responsibility to the people? They don't think in terms of reading. They don't think in terms of ability to acquire knowledge. At best, oh, we need a culvert. Oh, we need a borehole. Yes, these are important things, but what about the human capital development, which is only attainable through reading?
Okay, let me quickly get my last question to Coco. Coco, that brings me to the issue of availability of books. I remember in those days, we used to hear in Lagos, you could go to so many bookshops, CSS bookshops, even in Ibadan, challenge bookshops, and you get a whole lot of books that you wanted to read. But today, we have dearth of bookshops. You don't even have the books available. So what can be done to encourage publishers, indigenous publishers, come up with more books, authors write more books, so that they become available for people who want to read?
Thank you. In terms of availability of books, I think the library is very important, as the professor said. I'm a beneficiary of that. Growing up in Port Harcourt, as a child, I used to go to the Jubilee Library on Bernard Carr Street, and my father, would drop me off there, and it was just such an important part of my childhood. And the library was in a lovely, spacious compound with lawns and, big windows. It was airy, and it was just a haven. So we need the libraries. And if books are so expensive, then that's why the library is so important. And, as we've said, we need to encourage the players in the book chain. So you have the authors, you have the publishers, you have the booksellers, and that is where the forums like the book festivals come in. That is where opportunities, conferences, where they can sit down and look at the issues that need to be addressed and presented to the various parties. They need encouragement from the corporates. How about in the World Book Capital Year, for instance, we had writers' retreat. We had a writers' retreat. All over the world, you have that, where you pay writers to just take time off. They're given grants so that they can sit down and develop books. Many people are churning out books, but if you look at the books, the quality is not so good. And how do they improve the quality? Some of them by just the knowledge, and the book festivals give you that, because you meet the publishers, you talk to them, you meet the editors. We used to have different classes, master classes, where we bring people in their various fields to come and talk to aspiring writers. Not just talk to them, but hold classes that show them the ropes, the steps that you take to publish a good book. But if I go back to libraries, we have to move with the times. If we want to get the young people, get the youth. So I've talked and written extensively on libraries, and I've said that we should have libraries in every local government area, and I think we can do that. But beyond the libraries, we can have creative hubs. Like right now, Rainbow, we've been in meetings with UNESCO, and we've developed a template for creative hubs. And we're looking for states to collaborate with us, with UNESCO and Rainbow on this template. What are these creative hubs? They are spaces where you have not just libraries, but you have room for theater, room for other things. That way, in one spot, people can exercise the creative arts in the field of visual arts, dramatic arts, and literary arts. We know that in Port Harcourt, for instance, Shell Petroleum Development Company built a library in the World Book Capital year. And monthly, there's an open word, spoken word.
Oh, sorry, Coco. That's the much we can take from there. We will definitely, we can't come back to you. We're almost like out of time. We have to go to Ibadan right now, where we have Professor Olatokunbo. Let's get your closing thoughts, Prof.
I want all stakeholders to take reading habit as a very critical factor in the development of Nigeria as a nation. Because when you read, you gain knowledge. It has been proved all over that when you have a knowledgeable society, then the sky is the limit. So all stakeholders, federal government, state governments, local government, corporate bodies, individuals, please promote reading culture, most especially parents. It begins with you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Professor Olatokunbo is a national librarian and chief executive officer, National Library of Nigeria. Prof, we thank you for your thoughts and time on the program this morning. Professor Olatokunbo Aina, thank you very much for coming on the program. And also, too, want to say a very big thank you to Coco Kalango, who's a project manager, UNESCO World Book Capital 2019 founder, and a Rainbow Book Club. Thank you very, very much for coming on the program. And also, too, we also love to thank our guests that joined us via Skype. I think we lost that connection. We wish we could actually, keep that connection, but we just couldn't. She joined us via Skype from River State, Port Harcourt. She's Ibim Cemetery. She's Executive Director, Archdeacon Brown Education Center. Thank you very much, Ibim, for coming on the program. And finally, our guest here in the studio, Professor Musa Mai-Samari. He's the Dean, Faculty of Education, University of Abuja. We thank you so much for coming to share your thoughts with us on the program.
Thank you very much. Yes.
All right, our complimentary segment, Sports, is up.
Reigning African queens, the Tigress of Nigeria, on Thursday